I am really excited, to be honest. We are getting ready to start into a semi-lengthy series, 8 weeks. We saw a preview of this already. 5 weeks ago, we talked about Noah. After we got back from our vacation, seeing the Creation Museum and the Ark, and Mike and Irene just got back from there too, so they can attest to the incredible, overwhelming nature of being able to experience that. But we said we were going to, after being done with that section of Psalms, to come into this series entitled Used. Now the question is, what does that stir up in you when you hear that word? Do you like to be used? Is that something that sits well with you, that you go, yeah, I like that? I think usually within us, it gives a negative connotation. When we hear the idea of being used, we don't like that idea, but that is not what we are going to be addressing in this series. I want to be very clear from the beginning that this is a series where we're talking about the common people who have the ability to be used by an uncommon God. Recognizing that we are all on a faith journey and that every day we make decisions to open ourselves up to either be used by God or to not be used by God. And what that really tends to look like in all the ups in life and all the downs in life. What does it look like to live a surrendered life that we are willingly used by God? Well, I got some great news. The scriptures give us some amazing accounts. There are hundreds of people in this book that have done the journey before us. And their stories, they help us gain knowledge and understanding that we can use in situations along our journey. There's encouragement, there's excitement, there's examples that can speak into our lives of learning from their struggles, their knockdowns, but how they got back up and they continued to press on despite their situation. And we have access to these people and the stories all the time throughout Scripture. It's right here at the tip of our fingers. Seeing these people that continued to fight, to be used by a creator that was crazy in love with them, just as he's crazy in love with you. These are imperfect people who at times, they blew it. Feel it? I feel it. They wanted to be used, but they had their own struggles, seemingly unfair situations that arose in life, wrong decisions that were made, lack of understanding as to why things were going the way they were. Their stories, though, their stories are preserved. And they show how they interact with the ultimate story, and that's God's story, because this is God's story. Ultimately, every story that's in here pertains to the greater story of God, and because of that access, we really have no excuse to not learn from them. There's lessons that benefit us in wisdom and the challenges that we face in life. And even living in different culture, even different times, we actually have more in common than you probably think. And the insight from them helps us to live out our faith with a boldness and with a purpose. I want to give you a passage from the book of Hebrews. It's sort of a theme verse for us throughout this entire series. We'll revisit it once or twice more. Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Their stories in here, our stories today, God's ultimate story, everything intersects. Common people like you, like me, used by an uncommon God in his amazing plan. Today's story, actually there's going to be two, from the life of Abraham. You're going to find his story in that very first book of the Bible, Genesis. And Abraham, his life and his lessons teach us that those who went before us, they see things from a better perspective than those of us who are in the race currently. That makes sense, right? I mean, think about it. When it comes to others or yourself, when you've been through it yourself, it's easy for you to look at somebody else in that situation and come up with a solution for them, right? But when you're in the midst of that situation, it may not be as easy to understand it. See, the people that go through things before other people, we garner a more complete perspective because, well, we've already gone through something similar, and we've come out the other side, crossed the finish line, and we can be encouraged by those who have done that, who finished their race. And like I said, two stories in Abraham's life really connect to the main lesson this morning about what it means to have that true faith in God. But Abraham's faith wasn't always rock solid. Can we identify with that? I think we can. Like us, he had some moments, some doubts, some obstacles along the way. In that race, he pulled some, say, metaphorical hamstrings, running that race worked out for him. But he learned a thing or two along the way that we can learn from him. See, he had this amazing developed faith. We can learn to have this developed faith, and we can sort of define that. We're going to do that this morning. We're going to say this. Faith is the ability to trust, even when we don't completely understand. Faith is the ability to trust, even when we don't completely understand. See, we're trusting a God that is bigger than anything we can comprehend. There is so much more than there is to us, and on occasion, we're just simply not going to understand everything. But that's okay. Something that a lot of times we are taught growing up is that when you enter into a situation, yes, we want to do our best to always give an answer, but there are times when it's okay to say, I don't know. See, it's about being okay with knowing later. We may not simply understand everything, and so we've got questions, and it's okay to not understand. Now, this doesn't mean that we just sit around and do nothing because we don't understand. We need to be reading the Bible. We need to be praying in communication to God. We need to be doing life with others on the same journey as much as possible so that we can learn and grow. Grow in our knowledge, grow in our understanding, grow in our wisdom, grow in our relationship. But when we don't get it, when we can't grasp it in that moment, we have to be okay that we know we can trust God even though we may not understand it in that moment. Because God's never going to let us down. And as people who say want to be used by God, we have to have the same confidence that Abraham did when he chose to believe that God always does the right thing. Not sometimes, not on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not when we think he does. No, God always does the right thing. Will you say that with me? God always does the right thing. Now, here's the thing. The truth is that many of us can easily say that. In fact, our hearts probably genuinely believe it. But I wonder if you take a little deeper discussion at times, I bet there's a time in life where you may have asked, God, are you really doing the right thing? Or you may have looked at somebody and said, do you really think he's doing the right thing? Because, if he was doing the right thing, this prayer would have already been answered. Or if he was doing the right thing, this person wouldn't have died before their time actually came. Or if he was doing the right thing, he would have showed up when I really needed him. And that could go on and on. And the reality is, whether something's happening right now or it's going to happen later along the journey, we've probably all dealt with a moment where we've doubted God's ability to actually do the right thing in a situation. And good old Abraham, he wasn't any different. He was still human like you and me. See, the beginning of his story, God looks down at him and goes, hey, Abraham, I'm going to need you to trust me completely. Put aside all doubt and just know I'm going to take care of this. I'm actually going to make a great nation out of you. But in order to do that, I'm going to need you to pick up and leave everything you know somewhere else. Now, Abraham was around 75 years old when he moved his family to Haran in the Canaan area, and he started his new chapter there. The funny part is after all that happened, life just continued like it used to. His wife seemed to remain barren. There were no kids. The idea of this great nation to him seemed to be falling a little flat, I would assume. Years later, naturally, Abraham was having doubts about what God was doing. Well, and all He knew this, and so he sends a message to Abraham in Genesis 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, for I continue childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. He said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. Okay, you could hear this, right? Yeah, hey, God, that's all well and good that you're saying that again, but I'm not really seeing you hold up your end of the bargain here. I'm not seeing a whole lot that tells me this is legit. And in verse 4, God says, Behold, the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and the number of stars. Behold, if you are able to number them. Then he said to them, So shall your offspring be. If you're able to number the stars, that's how much your offspring will be. Abraham, right here in the midst of a certain situation and time in life, maybe doubting God's promise a little bit here, doubting that God was doing the right thing that he said he was going to do. But actually, Abraham, despite the doubts, with the reassurance, he knew the truth. Verse 6 actually says that he believed the Lord. And I believe that's because Abraham knew that God always does the right thing, first off, even if it takes a long time. I mean, it may not make logical sense. I'm going to make a great nation of you. Let's drag this out. I'm sure to Abraham that didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, dude was in his 80s now. His wife's in his 70s. The birds and the bees time might be running out a little bit. From our standpoint, God is notorious for taking a long time. I mean, if it's up to us, right? He would move faster in pretty much every situation in our life. For us, we want to get on a jet plane and get there. And God's going, no, just walk with me. Walk? It's 3,500 miles, God. Are you serious? But the Bible tells us that God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts in Isaiah 5. Also, God always has the bigger picture in mind, what we can't see that he sees. Isaiah tells us this. Lamentations tells us this through Jeremiah. And if you read the book of Revelation, I think you see the bigger picture. God has a perspective that we don't. He sees how it all ties together. I mean, think of Esther. Mordecai told her, God's intricately weaving the pattern of this. We may not understand this. But his timing, for such a time as this, we're going to look at that a lot deeper in about 8 weeks. We're going to look at Esther's story. But it's during that time that he uses that to work something in us, to work something out of us, to mold us and shape us greater for the plan and the purpose that he has for us. And either way, he always does the right thing, even if it takes a long time. See, the story continues. More time has gone by and still no child. So a reassurance was brought. It says Abraham believed him, but now more time continues to go by. And Abraham and Sarah, they do something that many of us actually get guilty of. Anybody ever devised plan B? Things weren't moving fast enough. I mean, we live in an instant society. Conveniences give us what we want, and it gives it to us when we want it, right now. It's natural for this mentality to then spill over into our faith journey. And Abraham, they were in that boat. They decided God must need a little help. Ever done that before? God's not on your timetable, so you try to step in, you try to make it happen yourself somehow. And that's what they decided to do. Genesis 16. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abraham, Behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. So go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. I guess they decided that they waited on God long enough. So they were going to accelerate the plan. And they tried by implementing Plan B, the plan of their own. And honestly, it didn't work. Yes, Hagar had a son. But it wasn't the foundation of God's great nation. It didn't work. Their plan was not going to be the answer. Why? Because God saw the bigger picture. His timetable was perfect. Even if they didn't see it, even if we don't see it, He always does the right thing if it takes a long time, and two, even if it seems completely absurd. I can think of many times in my life where I go, this is ridiculous. You've got to be kidding me. And I think maybe we see a little bit of that attitude here as we fast forward about 13 years. Genesis 18, the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. No, really, we're talking about like 45 years past here. Woman's like 89 years old, okay? I get it. Verse 12 says, so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. I think we get a little bit of God's typical response in situations like this. Hey, I don't know why she's laughing. It will be in my perfect timing, not your small, short-sighted timing. And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? I mean, if you grew up in Sunday school, you've heard this story on the basic level. The next year, Sarah has baby Isaac. And Abraham and Sarah, obviously in that moment, they realize God's timing is perfect, that He always does the right thing, even if it seems absurd in the ways that it's happening. And honestly, we know it's so much easier to look back on things and suddenly see how the timing was just right. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? But growing in faith, just like Abraham and Sarah, means that we trust God's timing. And we trust that it'll be perfect in the midst of our questions and our doubts and our pains and our struggles with it. We trust and have faith that God will move in His perfect timing. Because He always does the right thing, whether it takes a long time, if it seems absurd. And back to where we started, even if we don't understand it. We're going to fast forward again a little deeper into Abraham's story, where Isaac is probably a teenager. Oh yeah, we all know where we're going with this, don't we? God isn't done teaching Abraham about having a complete faith in Him, even at 100 plus years old, because we're never too old to keep learning, keep growing. Now, in Abraham's time, it was very common to sacrifice animals to God. It'd be pretty weird now. It was not then. If your neighbor is sacrificing animals in their backyard, you may want to call somebody. But there was a deeper meaning to this process. See, this idea of sacrifice was actually all about giving up a thing of value to serve for a greater purpose. The blood of animals was symbolically offered by the nation of God to pay for the sins of the people. This need for a blood covering was meant as a reminder to them of how serious their sin was to God. And Abraham was very familiar with this, so it wasn't a surprise to him when God said, hey, I need you to go up there to Mount Moriah and you're going to offer a sacrifice to me. Now, the surprise hit when He said, oh, by the way, it's going to be Isaac. Now, we know that God knew that He wasn't planning to go through with this, but Abraham didn't know that at the time. And so he takes his son up to Mount Moriah. He ties him up, puts him up on the altar, draws the knife, and prepares to sacrifice his son. And then in Genesis 22, we read, then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Now here's the interesting thing in the story is Abraham never questioned God after he told him to sacrifice his son. Of all things, why would there not be a question there? How do you get to that kind of a place of trust when it doesn't make sense and there's no way you can understand God's purpose in it? Well, think about the perspective that Abraham had gained throughout the rest of his life. The situations he'd been through, the things he'd seen God do. He's been through all of it now. He's been through the thick of it. He's trusting God completely. He'd questioned God on multiple occasions, and every time God proved to be faithful. He proved to be trustworthy. He could look back and recall the times when he thought, No, God, you're wrong. But it turned out God was faithful. No, God, you missed it this time. But it turned out God was right. God, I really don't understand your purpose behind this. But later, the big picture was revealed. He was finally at a point in life where he just simply trusted. Hebrews 11, the author of Hebrews, talks about the faith that Abraham had in chapter 11. By faith, starts that way. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promise was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, Through Isaac shall your offspring be named. Think about that for a minute. He doesn't question sacrificing his son, the son that God promised him that his offspring would come from, that would be greater than the number of the stars. Verse 19 is, this is power, and I think it gets overlooked way too easily. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead. Woo! There's some trust. There's some faith. I can willingly sacrifice my son because if this is how it's supposed to be, and God's covenant with me to make my offspring a great nation through my son, then even God can raise him from the dead if he has to. Abraham never actually saw someone raised from the dead, but his trust that God always did the right thing was even beyond his comprehension of how he was going to do it. It's because the more you know God, the more you grow in relationship with him. The more you understand him, the more your faith grows to a point where you learn to trust him. In Psalm 9, verse 10, it says, Those who know the Lord, trust him. Those who know the Lord, trust him. God has a big picture perspective. I mean, think about it. Abraham had no idea of how God was actually going to use his story. It would point generations of followers to the ultimate sacrifice, the greater point of the story. Scholars believe that it's actually right there at Mount Moriah, thousands of years later, that God would allow his only son, Jesus, to be sacrificed for the sins of the world, allowing him to be the substitute for what we deserved. See, if we want to be people that are truly used by God in powerful ways, we got to start realizing that our primary goal in our faith journey should be knowing God. Number one purpose, know God. And that purpose means that we learn to know him, but we may not understand everything. I mean, truly, if the prerequisite for our obedience to God's will is having to first understand God fully in every aspect, then what we're doing is we're reducing God to the size of our brains. And that's a small God. Because he's too big for us to fully comprehend. That's why as we learn to know him, as we seek him more in relationship, our trust grows. That's why our trust grows, because we're not going to be able to fully comprehend him. And our trust grows to the point that we will follow in obedience, even when we may not understand or comprehend. We may not get it, but we look at it and go, this is what he gave us, this is what he said, so this is what we'll do. If you really desire to be used by God in your time here on earth, we got to develop a faith like Abraham. A faith that's not easily shaken or broken or shattered by anything. That when something bad happens or life doesn't go our way or we don't like something and the unexpected occurs, it's not a faith that easily questions anything because our little brains can't comprehend it. Maybe there's an area right now that's coming to your mind, God's hitting you with this in your spirit, that you need to put more trust in today. Maybe it's the relationship or a situation where maybe you're doubting God to do it. Maybe you don't think God's answering the way that you think he should, or he's not answering when you think he should. But I'm telling you, today is a great opportunity to remind ourselves that no matter what, no matter the timing, the absurdity, or the comprehension, God always does the right thing.